For the wrong ones, you gotta try.
Good afternoon. I want to thank all of you for coming to this press conference. As some of you may not know, actually, very recently, the storm known as Harvey was upgraded, and it now is Hurricane Harvey. So that's what we'll be talking about. And it is organizing and gaining strength over time, and I think that's a function of those 90-degree waters in the Gulf of Mexico. And obviously, the delayed arrival on land actually gives it more time to strengthen. And so the nature of this storm has changed very much over the last number of hours. And it is getting more and more serious as time goes by. And we are expecting landfall in central Texas, potentially as a Category 3 hurricane. That will happen in all likelihood sometime early on Saturday morning. But we do know that even with that projected path, the outer bands of rain associated with this storm will drop heavy rains on Louisiana. This rain threat will continue into next week. And one thing that I want to make sure everyone is aware of, there is some potential that this storm will actually make landfall in Texas and then after some period of time re-enter the Gulf and potentially move eastward towards Louisiana. Now that is not forecasted as of now, but that is something that the Weather Service is telling us is a possibility, and they hope to have a better readout on that over time so that we would get plenty of advance notice should that happen. But both the heavy rain that we can expect with the hurricane making landfall right around Corpus Christi, Texas, with those rain bands, and the possibility that it could re-enter the Gulf and move towards Louisiana are both threats that we should all take very seriously. We do expect that this will be primarily a rain event and not a wind event. And the expectations right now, and these expectations are over several days. So I don't want anybody to think that these rains are going to come and over a period of hours or just a day or so drop on them. But this is going to happen over several days. But in southwest Louisiana, we're expecting 7 to 10 inches of rain. In central and south central Louisiana, 5 to 7 inches of rain. And one of the things that complicates this is the storm surge that we can expect as well. We know that from Cameron Parish to St. Mary Parish, the storm surge should be 1 to 3 feet. And that will obviously be worse at high tide, which we expect there will be a high tide at about 6:30 a.m. on Saturday morning and about 6:30 p.m. on Saturday evening as well. Obviously, we need the rivers to drain southwest Louisiana or wherever we happen to be getting rainfall, and storm surge inhibits that from happening and makes these rain events more severe than they would otherwise be. I would also remind everybody that we have had more than our fair share of afternoon thunderstorms across the state this summer, and so the ground is relatively saturated already. And so that will make it, any rain that we do receive will have that much greater impact and potential for flooding. The National Guard has received over over $500,000 sandbags that were purchased by the Governor's Office of Homeland Security. The National Guard, as well as Wildlife and Fisheries and the Fire Marshal's Office, have inventoried, made ready, and are pre-positioning boats, and also high water vehicles are being pre-positioned by the National Guard. With this being a water event, I'm encouraging everyone not to drive through high water. If you don't know that you can safely pass, then you shouldn't pass through those waters. And we anticipate that because of the rain and the storm surge, that there will, at some point over the next several days, be some road closures. Quite often, motorists will get to those areas that are impacted before folks from the Department of Transportation and Development, or before local officials can, to mark them and to close them. So we're asking people to exercise due diligence and not drive through standing water. Recent experience in Louisiana has told us that that leads to more fatalities than just about anything else related to these floods. I also want to encourage everybody to be diligent for an extended period of time. This storm is going to make landfall centered on Corpus Christi, Texas, sometime around Saturday morning. It may not be until late Sunday or Monday, potentially as late as Tuesday of next week, before the maximum impacts will be on the state of Louisiana. And to make sure that we are doing everything that we need to, both to coordinate with our federal partners, but also with local government as well, I have signed a statewide emergency declaration in preparation for Hurricane Harvey and its impacts on Louisiana. We do recognize that there are particular vulnerabilities right now around, or I should say in New Orleans, because of diminished electrical generation capacity and pump capacity. But we've known that for a number of days now. We've been actually partnering with New Orleans, along with our federal partners, to make sure that we're doing what we can to restore that capacity as quickly as possible. There is nothing about Hurricane Harvey in its current forecast that adds any additional concerns to New Orleans, but we are making sure that we're doing everything that we can to assist New Orleans, to include pre-positioning some assets in New Orleans should they be necessary. At this point in time, I'm going to turn the press conference over to Bill Durant of FEMA, and he will address you all, after which we will take questions, and obviously those questions can be addressed to any of the individuals that you see up here. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor. As the Governor said, I'm Bill Dorian with FEMA. Still here doing the recovery from the floods of last year. But FEMA is providing technical assistance to the state and the city of New Orleans in preparation, as well as pre-positioning some assets. We have an incident management team already here embedded in the state EOC and ready to support the state. And we really appreciate the readiness posture of the state and the local governments. It makes our job a lot easier getting ready early in these events, and the government appreciate the partnership. Thank you.
Thank you. I would say that while the storm is currently directed at Texas, with the landfall projected to be centered on or around Corpus Christi, obviously I always ask people to prepare and to pray, and in this case we should pray not just for ourselves and that the impacts of the storm be minimal, but also for our neighbors in Texas. And with that, we'll take questions.
Governor, when you said
Yes.
that you are putting assets in New Orleans, can you expand on that as far as the turbines, the generators down there, and how you're going to handle the flooding?
Yeah, well, first of all, the comments that I was making with that have to do with MREs and things
Okay.
like that. But the city of New Orleans has been working for some time to bring in additional generators. I think they brought in 14 or more 2-megawatt generators to make sure that the electrical generation capacity is ramped up quickly. I know that the turbines are being worked on and are coming back online as well. And the pumps that were down are being repaired and brought back online also. But we have been working with New Orleans for really a couple of weeks now, extensively with respect to planners and helping to identify those things that they would need to have available during this window of vulnerability, which based on the projected timeline of when the capacity is going to be brought back up to where we would want it, that vulnerability is between now and about September the 4th or 5th. And I would just reiterate, there is nothing about the current forecast related to Harvey that causes any additional concerns with respect to New Orleans. But we do know that there is a potential possibility, perhaps I should say, that Harvey does re-enter the Gulf and move back towards Louisiana. And so we're trying to be extra careful and diligent in our planning and our preparations. Yes, ma'am.
Governor, have you been involved in discussions about, we keep hearing about possible evacuations of New Orleans. Are you in discussions?
Yeah, but not as it relates to this particular incident. We're not talking about pulling the trigger to evacuate New Orleans or any part of it right now as it relates to Harvey. But these are conversations we've been having for a couple of weeks because of the additional vulnerability down there that should the need arise because of a particular threat, then we have to be able to make that happen. And so, yeah, those conversations have been having, those plannings have been taking place. But, you know, there's always a plan to evacuate everybody in the state of Louisiana, especially in the southern part of our state. But we are making sure that we have current plans in place for New Orleans, identifying those areas that are particularly vulnerable, which, as I understand it, west of the Industrial Canal and east of the river. So it's the old city. And not all of that area is equally vulnerable, but we've identified different areas that we would probably have to phase evacuations over time. And so the planning has been refined. The assets necessary to effectuate the plans have been identified. But I don't want anybody to think that we or the city of New Orleans at this time is close to pulling the trigger on evacuation. That's not the case.
Can you quantify how many boats or high water vehicles have been pre-positioned that will be?
Well, I cannot. I'll ask General Curtis to come up and talk to you about it from the perspective of the National Guard.
Yeah, so currently in New Orleans, we have 6 boats and there's 15 high water vehicles. But as we see, if Harvey starts to threaten us, we have plans to move in 36 boats, and the amount of high water vehicles will just be driven by what the requirements are. We have several hundred throughout the state that we can reposition there as needed. And then Wildlife and Fishery has assets they will bring in the way of boats. I don't have those numbers. And then the fire marshal has some search and rescue teams that have boats. So we will have pretty good capacity inside the city if we need it.
And we'll get you those numbers in just a few moments. If memory serves me, the Wildlife and Fisheries has over 150 boats ready with personnel, and the fire marshal's office is somewhere around 50. But we'll get that to you.
Yeah, no, I understand there is a possible lane closure on I-10. Are you worried about Texans, or it's coming? Are you worried about Texans evacuating and that may be causing a problem?
Well, we are not. We don't have any of those concerns at this point in time. It is something that the Department of Transportation is monitoring, and we are in consultation with the folks in Texas, because if they start with mandatory, or I guess even just recommended evacuations, individuals could evacuate to Louisiana. However, it would be much better for them to go north, and based on what the storm may do over the next several days after it makes landfall. So we're hoping that they don't get directed, not just hoping, but we're coordinating so that they don't get directed into Louisiana, not just because of construction going on I-10, but because of the possibility that the storm moves towards Louisiana next. Yes, ma'am.
If the storm hits Texas and then comes back into the Gulf, do you guys have an idea of where it might hit in Louisiana?
No, that is a possibility that the National Weather Service warned us about. It is still not. It is not more likely than not that it happens, and it's so far in the future that they can't, with any precision, predict exactly where the storm would hit in Louisiana, what its strength would be, or anything like that. But there is some precedent for this happening. I think it was Allison. And so if you all look back at Allison in the past, you can see that this has happened before, and it is possible that it would happen again. Although at this point in time, it's less than a 50% chance that would happen. Yes, ma'am.
Governor, with all due respect for the getagainplan.org website, for our listeners who may not be going online to check, what recommendations would you make for preparations now for those in Southwest Louisiana?
Yeah, well, first of all, to be tuned in to whatever instructions are going to be given from the local government, from the local police jurors or parish officials. Every parish has an Office of Emergency Preparedness. They are in regular consultation with us and with the Weather Service, and so they know what's happening at any given time. They know the areas of those parishes that are most vulnerable, the lowest lying areas, or the stretches of roadway, for example, that might become impassable. And so I would encourage people to pay attention to what they're being told, and then also do what they're going to be told as well. Individuals should try to have on hand enough food and other essentials to where they can go for up to 72 hours without having to rely on any government assistance. And so I encourage everybody to do that. But it is not too late to get a game plan and to go to getAGamePlan.org in order to identify those things that you should be doing, and also to identify the ways in which you can stay in touch with individuals who are going to be putting out information that will be very important to you.
One last question.
Yes, sir.
Hi. I mean, you just mentioned New Orleans, obviously, the boats and high water vehicles there. Are there any other spots just to map out across the state that are the priorities as far as allocating these resources?
No, we're taking a balanced approach to where we pre-position assets. Obviously, because of the projected path of the storm, Southwest Louisiana is the biggest concern. That's where the most rainfall will happen. That's where the greatest storm surge effects are going to happen. And so that is the focal point. But beyond that, it is impossible to know exactly what area the state will receive rain over the next several days. And one of the things that you don't want to do is position too many assets in one area only to find out you need them somewhere else. And this is going to play out not just over the next 36 to 48 hours. This is going to play out over the next week or so. Because once this storm makes landfall, the movement is projected to slow down considerably from there, which makes it particularly dangerous because you'd much rather a storm just move out of the area, because the longer it sits in one place, the more rain that it will drop. And so, this is a very serious storm. It's one that I want everyone to take seriously, and we will be monitoring the situation in regular consultation with the folks at the Weather Service. So as we will know as the forecasts change, we will take those changes into consideration as to how we position assets and the information that we obviously will give you all. At this point in time, we do not have an additional press conference scheduled. I would not expect one before Saturday afternoon. But if that changes, we will certainly let you know. Thank you all very much.